What if the part of you trying to heal is also the part that keeps you broken? You sit with your thoughts, journal your pain, name your patterns, and somehow, the more aware you become, the more trapped you feel. Isn't self-awareness supposed to be the path to freedom? Then why does it sometimes feel like a prison? Here's the paradox. The more we watch ourselves, the more we split ourselves. One part becomes the observer and the fixer. The other becomes the broken thing being worked on. And that split creates a loop you can't escape. You try to quiet your mind, but who is trying? You try to let go of ego, but isn't that still ego? It's like standing between two mirrors, reflections folding in on themselves forever. In this video, we're diving into one of the most haunting truths about human consciousness, that the very act of trying to fix yourself can become the thing that keeps you stuck. We'll unpack the spiritual and scientific sides of this and explore what it really means to integrate instead of endlessly improve. Because maybe, the real freedom isn't in fixing the self, but in seeing through it. Self-awareness is a gift, but it cuts both ways. We're the only species on Earth that can observe our own thoughts, not just feel fear, but watch ourselves feeling it, not just make mistakes, but analyze them, judge them, try to correct them. This capacity is rooted in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that gives us planning, reflection, and imagination. It's also where the default mode network lives, that internal narrator that never seems to shut up. This narrator is the voice that says, "You shouldn't have said that," or "What will they think of you?" The voice that loops your thoughts like a highlight reel of self-doubt. And here's where it gets strange. The more you observe yourself, the more tangled it becomes. You notice your anger, then you feel guilty about the anger, then you're annoyed that you feel guilty. Now you're observing the guilt and judging the annoyance and trying to fix the judgment. It's a hall of mirrors with no exit. You become the surgeon and the wound at once. At first, awareness feels like growth. You see your patterns, your triggers, your conditioning. But without integration, awareness becomes obsession. You start watching yourself so closely that you forget how to be. And in that constant analysis, something is lost, something instinctive, fluid, alive. Because when every moment is under a microscope, the self gets dissected into parts. The part that wants, the part that resists, the part that judges the whole thing. This is the ego watching itself, and it creates a feedback loop that feeds on itself. So yes, self-awareness can heal, but only if we understand how to use it. Without wisdom, it becomes a trap. Without compassion, it becomes self-surveillance. Without wholeness, it becomes yet another way to punish ourselves for being human. And the tragedy? Most people don't even know it's happening. They think they're evolving, but they're just becoming better at criticizing themselves. And the deeper you go, the more it hurts. You start with good intentions. Heal your trauma, face your fears, become more self-aware. You read the books, go to therapy, sit in silence, and name every wound. You think, if I can just get to the root of it all, I'll finally be free. But instead of freedom, what you often find is more pain. The more you look inside, the more flaws you discover. The more honest you become, the more uncomfortable truths you uncover. Every new layer you peel back reveals something raw, a buried fear, an old shame, a behavior you thought you'd outgrown. And it starts to feel like a trap, like no matter how much work you do, there's always more to fix, always another wound, another shadow, another pattern. We've been sold the illusion that healing is a staircase. You climb a little higher each time, and eventually you reach the top. But real healing isn't linear. It's a spiral. You revisit the same places, just with a deeper awareness. And that awareness, while powerful, can also be painful. Because now you don't just feel your suffering, you watch yourself suffer. You analyze it, label it, try to manage it. And in doing so, you split into pieces. The part that's in pain and the part that judges the pain. This split is where suffering deepens. Psychologically, it's called repression. The more you resist a feeling, anger, sadness, insecurity, the more it festers beneath the surface. You say, "I shouldn't feel this." And now the feeling has something new to feed on: shame. Emotion becomes entangled with judgment, and judgment breeds more fragmentation. Even in spiritual spaces, we're told to rise above, to let go, to vibrate higher. But behind much of that language is a hidden message: you're not enough as you are. So we chase this ideal version of the self, peaceful, balanced, healed, and reject anything that doesn't fit the image. But you can't reject your way into wholeness. What we resist grows stronger. The more you try to kill the shadow, the more it hunts you. And every time you think you've transcended something, life sends it back, louder, darker, messier, just to show you it was never gone. The ego, believing it can fix itself, keeps chasing an endpoint that doesn't exist. Because knowing yourself isn't about getting clean or perfect. It's about getting real. And real means raw. It means sitting with your contradictions, your failures, your humanity. It means giving yourself the grace to be unfinished. Awareness without compassion becomes a weapon. You turn it inward and start wounding yourself with it, over and over, without realizing that the pain isn't coming from the wound, it's coming from the way you treat it. So yes, knowing yourself can feel like suffering, but maybe the suffering isn't from the knowing. Maybe it's from the belief that you shouldn't be what you find, and that belief, that there's a better version of you just around the corner, is the heartbeat of the spiritual feedback loop. You become the seeker, the student, the work in progress. And it feels noble at first, humble even. You say things like, "I'm doing the work," or "I'm healing my inner child," or "I'm raising my vibration." And none of that is wrong, until it becomes a treadmill you can't step off. Because here's the paradox: the seeker becomes trapped by the act of seeking. The more you search for wholeness, the more you reinforce the idea that you're broken. You try to become more spiritual, and in doing so, subtly reject who you are right now. Every mantra, every meditation, every retreat becomes another way of saying, "I am not enough yet." And the ego? It's clever. It doesn't mind dressing up in spiritual robes. It loves playing the role of the seeker because it gets to stay alive. It turns healing into identity. It turns awakening into performance. You become addicted to the pursuit of peace rather than peace itself. You're chasing silence while running from your own noise. And slowly, without realizing it, the very tools meant to liberate you become chains. You meditate not to connect, but to escape. You journal not to feel, but to fix. You repeat affirmations not out of love, but out of fear that if you don't, the pain will return. What was meant to bring integration becomes a ritual of rejection. Because fixing yourself, even in spiritual language, is often just another form of self-abandonment. You're not healing because you love yourself. You're healing because you can't stand who you are. You become both the jailer and the prisoner, the one who sets the rules, and the one endlessly punished for breaking them. And still, you think freedom is just one more insight away, one more breakthrough, one more dark night of the soul, and then you'll finally be whole. But what if there's nothing to transcend? What if the real path isn't about rising above, but going deeper into the places you've been trying to bypass, the grief, the rage, the doubt, the parts you labeled low vibration and tried to cast out? Because darkness isn't the enemy. Darkness is just light that hasn't been loved yet. And shadow work isn't about fighting your demons. It's about turning toward them, eye to eye, and saying, "You're part of me. Let's walk together." That's integration. What you can't face will continue to rule you from the shadows. But what you can consume, what you can embrace, digest, and honor, becomes fuel. Fuel not for perfection, but for authenticity. Because real spirituality isn't about becoming more divine. It's about becoming more honest, more human, and sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stop seeking altogether. Because here's the truth no one tells you when you begin this journey. You cannot fix the self with the self. Let that sit for a moment. It sounds like a riddle, but it's actually a revelation. You spend years chasing healing, reading the books, doing the meditations, convinced there's a version of you who will one day break through. A higher self, a wiser self, a cleaner self, the one who will finally have it all figured out. But who is doing that fixing? It's the same mind that created the wound, the same ego that's terrified of being seen, the same part of you that judges, calculates, avoids, and edits your every emotion. You become the solution and the problem in the same breath, which creates a strange kind of loop. A loop where every attempt at healing reinforces the belief that something in you must be fixed. And round you go. Try this thought experiment. Can a knife cut itself? Can a mirror reflect itself without help? Can a flame burn itself? Of course not, but that's exactly what we ask the mind to do. To dissect itself, to fix itself, to somehow heal itself while still being the thing in need of healing. It's the ultimate self-referencing paradox. And science, interestingly, gives us a metaphor, the observer effect in quantum physics. The idea that the act of observing a particle changes the behavior of that particle. Why? Because the observer is not separate from the system. You're influencing what you observe simply by watching it. Now apply that inward. You try to observe your thoughts, but it's the mind watching the mind. So instead of clarity, you get distortion. Every insight you have about yourself has already been altered by the ego's filter. Every analysis is colored by your own biases, fears, memories, and unconscious agendas. You're not seeing the truth of who you are. You're seeing a distorted echo, shaped by the very mind trying to define it. And here's where the trap gets deeper. You start believing this distorted echo is the real you. You identify with your thoughts, your pain, your story. And then try to fix those things from inside the story, never realizing you're just rearranging furniture in a dream. What's missing isn't more effort. What's missing is space. The awareness that sees the self is not the self. It's not your identity, your personality, your trauma, your timeline. It's not your opinions or your memories. It's not even your beliefs about who you are. It's something deeper, quieter, unmoving. It's the space in which all of that happens. You could call it pure awareness, stillness, the witness, consciousness itself. The name doesn't matter. What matters is recognizing that it's the only part of you that doesn't need to be fixed, because it was never broken to begin with. And real transformation begins when you start to recognize that awareness as home, when you stop identifying with the contents of the mind and begin to rest in the context of being. When you realize you don't have to solve yourself, you just have to stop confusing your thoughts for yourself. Because you are not the fixer. You're the field in which the fixer appears and disappears. You're not the story. You're the silence it arises in. And when you touch that space, that's when the healing begins, not because you forced it, but because you finally stepped out of the loop. So if the self can't fix the self, if seeking becomes a trap, and if the one trying to heal you is the very one keeping you fragmented, then what is the way out? It's not escape. It's not transcendence. It's integration. And integration doesn't mean you've figured it all out. It doesn't mean you've erased every trigger or silenced every inner critic. Integration means you've stopped trying to throw pieces of yourself away. You've stopped pretending that only your good side is worthy of existing. You don't become light by running from the dark. You become light by walking through it, slowly, with presence, with humility. You let the darkness teach you what it came to show. You stop demonizing your flaws and start understanding them. You stop resisting your pain and start listening to it. Because every wound has a message. Every shadow was once a strategy, a way you learned to protect yourself. Even the behaviors you hate the most, the people-pleasing, the anger, the addiction, the control, they were all born from somewhere tender, somewhere scared, somewhere sacred. Integration is the art of turning toward that part of you and saying, I see you. I get it. You were trying to help me survive. That's not weakness, that's alchemy. Alchemy, the ancient art of turning lead into gold, has never been about getting rid of the lead. It's about burning through it, applying heat, applying pressure, staying in the fire long enough for the transformation to happen. But here's the twist no one talks about. You are the fire. It's not some mystical force outside you. It's your willingness to stay present with your discomfort, to hold space for the contradictions, to stop splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable, and instead allow everything to belong. Because true integration is not about becoming better, it's about becoming whole. That means no more chasing the perfect version of you, the healed version, the higher self, the flawless projection you use to impress spiritual communities or social media followers. That's just another mask, another escape. The real work is quieter, messier, sometimes invisible. It happens when you catch yourself judging your sadness and soften into it instead. It happens when you notice an old pattern and choose curiosity over condemnation. It happens when you give yourself permission to be both the sacred and the struggling, the wise and the wounded, the light and the shadow, in the same breath. That's the moment self-awareness matures into self-acceptance. And that's when the endless loop begins to dissolve, because the loop is sustained by resistance, the constant pushing and pulling inside your own mind. But once you drop the war and allow all of you to exist, something shifts. You're no longer trying to escape your humanity. You're learning to embody it. This doesn't mean your pain vanishes. It means it becomes part of your power. It means you no longer see healing as becoming someone else, but as becoming more fully yourself. Not despite your shadows, but because of them. You begin to carry yourself differently, not because you're fixed, but because you're no longer fighting. You begin to live differently, not because life got easier, but because you stopped demanding it to be perfect. And you begin to love differently, not because others changed, but because you're no longer projecting your unloved parts onto them. Integration doesn't give you a new self. It gives you back every part you tried to leave behind and teaches you how to carry them with grace. You stop trying to shine over your darkness. You let the two dance together, and that, right there, is what wholeness looks like. Not perfect, but real, not polished, but free. And that's the invitation, to stop treating yourself like a puzzle that needs to be solved. Because what if there's nothing wrong with you? What if the self that's been trying so hard to fix, heal, improve, transcend, was never supposed to be in charge in the first place? What if your entire identity as a seeker has just been a clever disguise for avoiding your own wholeness? You see, the paradox doesn't go away, but it transforms. You'll still have thoughts. You'll still feel pain. You'll still be tempted to work on yourself. But now you know the trap. You've seen the loop. And most importantly, you've touched the space outside of it. And in that space, something sacred happens. You begin to witness the self without needing to fix it. You begin to feel your emotions without needing to manage them. You begin to live without constantly analyzing whether you're doing it right. This isn't passivity. It's not giving up. It's a deeper kind of engagement, one that comes from stillness, not striving. Because when you stop running, you see that you were never broken. The pain you carried wasn't a flaw, it was a signal. The shadows weren't your enemy, they were invitations. The loop wasn't a failure, it was your teacher. And maybe the self doesn't need to be transcended. Maybe it just needs to be included. You are not here to get rid of who you are. You are here to remember who you've always been, before the strategies, before the stories, before the shame. A process, not a problem. A mystery, not a mistake. If this message resonated with you, don't just click away. Let it sit with you. Let it undo something. And if you're ready to stop fixing and start integrating, drop a comment below. I choose wholeness. Because this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about finally coming home to who you've always been.